Very good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Councillor Ian Edwards and I am Chairman of the Central and South Planning Applicant Committee. A few formal announcements just before we get into business. First of all, warm welcome to anybody who may be following us online as well. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, members of the public, this meeting is being captured for YouTube. The camera's ahead of you on that dome. It's facing this way, so members in the public gallery are not featured on the YouTube. But as soon as you come forward to speak as a petitioner or as an agent, then of course you do become visible. Okay, fire alarm. We're not expecting one tonight, so if it happens, we will be evacuating. The best way is the way you came in, so it's out through those doors. And then we'll actually go straight on and down some other stairs. Don't worry about it, we'll be with you and we'll escort you. If for whatever reason that fire exit is not available to us, there are a fire exit behind us, so don't worry about it. Mobile devices, can I please ask that everybody has their mobile device turned to silent? And residents' feedback forms are provided for you and also for anybody who's following us online by pull down menu. There is a feedback form that enables you to comment on how we might improve these committee meetings. We do try and make them open to members of the public, and we do value your comments to try and help us make them better, more accessible, more understandable to our residents. So if you are minded, please do send those in. Okay, now a little bit about how the meeting is run. We're actually only in part one, so everything's going to be in public tonight, so we need to go into that pitch of the speech. I'll talk a little bit about speaking rights. Although we're meeting in public, it's not a public meeting, so I'm sorry that there are no general speaking rights. You're more than welcome, of course, to be here and to listen, but the only people that can address, members of the public that can address the committee are petitioners or somebody acting on their behalf, and the agent or applicant in response to such a petition against. And I'll talk you through how we do the petitions when we get to that. A little bit about our business. A few items on the agenda, which we'll march through very quickly, but I'll introduce you to all the players in the room because there's a lot of us and you might wonder who we are and what we're doing. As I say, I'm Ian Edwards and I'm chairman of the committee. The members are also councillors and they are the voting members of the committee. I only vote in the event of a tie. And I'll introduce them to you from my far right hand side: Councillor Ahmed Wallana, Councillor Chapman, Councillor Chamdell, Councillor Brightman, Councillor Yarrow. And on my far left hand side, Councillor Dillon, Councillor Duncan and Councillor Bira. Okay, as I say, they are the councillor voting members. The other people around the table are officers of the council, and they each perform specialist roles. On my far left-hand side, Glenn Egan is our legal advisor. Nisha Teji, Democratic Services, is a clerk to this meeting. James Rogers, Head of Planning, gives advice in that regard. Meg Harani is a team leader of planning, can also give advice, but will be presenting each application. And Alan Tilley is our Transport and Aviation Manager. Each of the committee members has seen all the papers, so the presentation is in addition to the papers that have been read and the plans that have been circulated to the members. Okay. We will very quickly march through a little bit of procedure, which we have to go through. And agenda item 1 is apologies for absence.
No apologies.
Item 2, declarations of interest matters come before this committee. Okay. I need to check. I understand, Danielle, you're the applicant on agenda item 6. Petitioner, for or against? Petitioner against, that's fine. That's absolutely fine, thank you. The reason I ask that is that we sit together as governors in a primary school. And there would, I think, be a conflict if you were the applicant. I think that would be pushed over. But as you are not, I can't see that there is a conflict there.
Yeah, I would have to declare the same interest as you because I'm also on the same governing body.
Thank you very much, Councillor Duncan. But that's great. That's been clarified, and therefore there is no conflict of interest. Okay. To sign and receive minutes of the previous meeting, we have those in our pack. The date on the 22nd of May. Colleagues, have they agreed? Agreed. No matters have been notified in advance or urgent. That was item 4. Item 5 is to confirm that everything's in public. So we're now moving into the actual meat of the business, which are the planning applications, and we start with the applications with petition. Agenda item 6, number 9, Maygood Green.
Thank you, Chairman. This application relates to 9 Maygood Green, which is a ground floor unit in a semi-detached block of 4 such units, located in the northern corner of Maygood Green. This application is for a vehicular crossover and is the subject of 6 letters and 2 petitions, and the details of the consultation replies are set out on pages 9 and 10 of the agenda. The main issue for members to consider are highway safety and on-street parking provision. In terms of highway safety from the crossing itself, the width of the crossing complies with the Council's normal standards, the depth of the hard standing within the site is sufficient to accommodate a vehicle, and the proposal complies with the requirement that at least 25% of the front garden should be maintained for soft landscaping. Thus, it is a question of the loss of on-street parking as a result of the proposal which needs to be considered. It's clear that at present there is a high on-street parking demand within Maygood Green and the surrounding roads. Whilst it's admitted that parking in front of the site may be informal and somewhat haphazard, it does result in maximising parking capacity on the street. The proposal would result in the loss of this on-street parking, which in turn would place additional parking pressure where such parking is at a premium. It is for this reason that the proposal is considered unacceptable, and it is a very balanced view, but it is recommended for refusal. I can just go through the plans. The blue's the primary. Oops. Sorry, don't know where that came from, but that's the site, and don't know where the plans have gone. There we go. So that shows and the hatched areas are the landscape proposed, and that's in more detail. And sorry, there's some confusion with the photographs. These are this is the actual site. It is the corner site there with the red barrier in front of it at the present, and these are street views. Thank you, Chairman.
Mr. Harani, can you go back to the first photograph? Is that it? Is that?
Yeah,
that is it.
Yeah, that's how it is daily, how people park.
Okay. There are some issues here that we will undoubtedly discuss. Thank you very much for that. Thank you. Okay, we have a petitioner, Danielle Dean. If you'd like to come forward. The chair over there, seat. Before you see a microphone, and there's a button at the front, that's toggle on, toggle off. We do need you to have the microphone on when you speak, otherwise it isn't captured on YouTube. And also we may not fully hear what you're saying. You have 5 minutes of speaking time. We use lights to assist you. You will see lights before you. The green light will run for 4 minutes. Okay. When the amber light comes on, you get 1, and when red comes, I will draw you to a close, and I must do so at that point. So when you're ready, if you kick off, just turn the microphone off. We'll start talk. Thank you.
So thanks for seeing us tonight. But I arrived on my holiday back on Monday, so I was very late in knowing about this meeting. So I have actually written out what I want to get across tonight. So forgive me if I'm script reading. I'll try and make eye contact with. So the petition of 24 signatures are all residents that live on the green, and 3 of the signatures currently reside in the Masonette block itself that would be directly affected. Around Maygood Green and surrounding roads, parking is already extremely limited, as you can see, especially from 5:30 p.m. onwards, where the residents return from work and at weekends. A parking scheme now in place at top of Worcester Road has caused more volume of cars around the green. This, coupled with Brunel University students parking and sometimes airport people leaving their cars for 2 weeks on a trot, is more strain on the parking. If permission was to given to this particular drop-down curb, it will displace 10 to 12 other resident vehicles for just one vehicle to be placed on a drive. Parking is not ideal where we live. However, as neighbours for over 15 years and probably more, we have been working together in that concentrated area of the green in the turning head, and up until the start of this planning process, we've had no problems or targeted parking tickets to residents. I do think that it is unfortunate that the applicant is not yet living in the home and working with the neighbourhood to see how difficult it all was for us, but also how we all work together to try and resolve it. As noted by the highway officer, parking in the turning head is much less disruptive than parking in and around the green, and that turning head has been used as a turning head for years, and the road on the green is wide enough now, as you can see, to drive completely around it, and probably more access than you would up Worcester Road. So the turning head is neither near or here anymore, really. For me, where I live, my house is located, it would mean that I would have to look at the side of the applicant's car from my living room window at quite a close proximity, which is not really desirable. And it is noted of the head of the Planning, Transportation and Regeneration report that the recommendation is one of refusal for this drop-down curb. We are hopeful that today this committee will uphold this refusal. This has certainly caused worry and concern for all immediate neighbours in these 4 houses and in the masonettes, and also to imagine for the applicant alike. And I think you mentioned it before, but just to note, I did submit, just to be proactive, 2 petitions at the same time to ask the council to come down and review our parking issues on the green for a longer term solution for residents. And that's all I have to say. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. Colleagues, are there any questions toward the petitioner? Thank you very much. Dean, of course you may.
And has the council come back to you about the petition for resolving your parking issues?
No, not at the moment.
Thank you. That's a matter that needs to be picked up outside of the committee, and I'll be encouraging our all councillors to get in touch with you again to take that forward. But thank you very much. I invite you to return to your seat. Do we have the Claire Beekhouse, the agent or applicant, you wish to speak? If you come forward, please. Again, you have 5 minutes, 4 minutes with the green light, 1 with the amber, and when it comes to the red, I must draw you to a close. Yes, thank you. Thank you.
Hi all, I'm Claire Beekhouse, the owner of 9 Maygood Green, UB83TG, and I appeared today in relation to the approval by London Borough of Hillingdon for vehicle crossing and since the subsequent renovation. After a number of years residing in Hillingdon, I decided to purchase my first home in 2017. Following the purchase of this property, I applied to the Highways project for approval of a vehicle crossing on the 7th of November 2017. At the time of this application, I did not seek legal advice and followed the online web-based application, which did not notify me or flag up at any point that I needed to apply for planning permission. The approval for the domestic vehicle crossing was confirmed in writing by the Highways project on the 3rd of December 2017. I received a quotation for the construction of this in sum of £700, which was paid on the 28th of December 2017. They also instructed me to carry out hard landscaping to the front of my property and the removal of the fence. On the basis that the domestic vehicle crossing had already been approved in writing, I instructed the services of West London Artificial Grass to carry out work to the front garden in preparation for the installation of the vehicle crossing. The work had been completed in majority, and a mere 5% of the work still remain outstanding. In addition, I've paid a total sum of £5,200. Following completion of the majority of the works, I received an email communications from Gordon Johnson, project engineer from London Borough of Hillingdon on the 14th of February, stating that the application had been approved prematurely and the planning application is required. I reiterate that I did not receive any prior notification nor was there any stipulations to the approval when it was granted on the 3rd of December 2017, some 2 months earlier. I received a further email from Isaac Quayak, the Highways Delivery Manager, on the 16th of February 2018, confirming that Highways Project had inadvertently approved the crossover ahead of planning permission being sought, therefore accepting liability. It was confirmed that such an error was due to an internal process failure and no through fault of my own that work should all cease. In accordance with such an email, I submitted an application for planning permission with their advice on the 7th of the 3rd, 2018 and paid a further sum of £206. I've been notified that such work cannot take place until planning permission has been granted. Despite Nicola Taplin receiving all of this paperwork in accordance with the previous approval and her understanding the background, she's failed to take this into consideration with her recommendations. Given the above, it seems like the application for the planning permission will be refused despite the initial approval. Given the inadvertent error by London Borough of Hillingdon, I've paid a sum of £5,200, a further £700, which I note has still not been returned, together with the cost of the planning application. If permission is not granted, I shall require to reinstate the land to its original position, costing me a further £5,000. Therefore, I would be at a loss of approximately £11,106. I seek to readiness the situation without causing further delay, anxiety and stress, and propose one of the three of the following. 1. The London Borough of Hillingdon deal with the application as submitted and grant this so that the construction of domestic vehicle crossing can take place without any further delay. 2. The works continue in accordance with the original permission granted. 3. I'm reimbursed for my costs, including the instruction services of West London Artificial Grass, the sum of £700, and as paid to London Borough of Hillingdon for the works that I seek to reinstate the land. I have since sought legal advice on my position, and if a suitable solution is not reached, I've since sought legal advice on my position, and if a suitable solution is not reached, I shall proceed to pursue a claim in County Court and issue a letter before action. I shall also notify the local newspapers in the manner in which my application has been handled. Should you require sight of any of my proof of documents, I've referred these for your approval. And I just want to make note that the comment made by the ward councillor evidently shows that he or she is advocating illegal parking. She mentions 8 or 9 vehicles.
Ms. Beekhouse, I must draw you to a close at that point.
Thank you very much.
I'm very grateful to you. Okay, colleagues, are there any questions at all of the petitioner? No. Thank you very much. I invite you to return to your seat. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, I mean, obviously matters have been raised there that are embarrassing. This isn't the right forum to be debating the merits of arguments relating to the process about which this has happened. That needs to all be set aside. What we have to do here as a planning committee is consider the planning application in accordance with the policies and the guidance that we're given, okay? And the process and the issues that have been raised by the applicant will be attended to elsewhere. Okay, so with that in mind, what we have here is a straightforward planning application and the impact now to be considered on the highways. Councillor Dillon.
So we disregard the legal position at the moment, do we? Or
yes, all we do is... Of course, sorry, my apologies. I do need to read Councillor Mills's comments into the record. I've overlooked. We need to set aside the issue here about the process, about whether or not highways have taken monies and encouraged work to be commenced. That is beyond the scope here. All we are considering here is the planning application, and we are considering it within the merits of it. Yeah.
So what perhaps if I can help committee further, you need to reflect on whether the petitioner, what material planning considerations she raised, and quite a lot, I'm afraid, of what she said didn't relate directly to the planning application and related to a separate process. Yeah. So irrespective of what's happened with that process, you need to focus on the planning application.
Okay, so I was getting ahead of myself because what I should have done is read into the record the comments from the ward councillor, Councillor Mills, who couldn't be available but has asked for this to be read in. And it is, unfortunately I'm unable to attend in person this evening. However, I would like to add my support to the petitioners in objecting to this application. As has been set out in the report, Maygood's Green is subject to high levels of on-street parking stress, and given the lack of public transport nearby, there is a large reliance from residents on vehicle usage. The location of this property in a corner of Maygood's Green, which contains the access to 4 maisonettes and a further 3 family homes. Hopefully images shown to you by officers will show the current parking situation in this corner, which has been self-governed responsibly by neighbours over the years. Adding a drop curb here would remove the parking possibility for all these cars, and there is nowhere else on the green for them to be displaced to. I trust members see the detrimental impact this proposal would have, and trust that they will follow the officer's recommendation and refuse the application. That's Councillor Mills. Okay. So, the merits here of the application relates to the impact on the highway. What we have is a photograph that's showing irregular parking. One of the questions that immediately comes to my mind, and maybe this is something that our legal advisor can give up, is what consideration or to what extent can we take into consideration the illegal parking that appears to be occurring here, and the extent to which we may feel obliged to allow that illegal parking to continue for the benefit of the public by refusing this application. Or is it something that we need to set aside and disregard the fact that there is illegal parking? Because I'll leave that one to you.
Thank you, Chairman. My view is that illegal parking is not a relevant planning consideration. The planning considerations are mentioned in the report. I think just to reiterate the advice previously given, the application needs to be determined on its merits in accordance with the policies in the report. Thank you.
Okay, but are we taking into account lawful parking spaces or all parking spaces, including unlawful parking spaces?
Chairman, my advice would be lawful parking spaces.
Thank you.
If I can add to that, so we, in terms of, if we took it strictly on lawful parking spaces, there'd still be a loss of parking because we've done a kind of calculation and we think you'd lose 2 lawful spaces but gain 1 off-road space. So there'd certainly be a loss of 1 lawful space, and then there's the further issue of how much weighting what one can put on the loss of unlawful spaces, which might be difficult to defend at appeal, as explained by the legal officer. That's not to say I think we can say 100% they wouldn't be given weighting at appeal, but I wouldn't go against the legal officer's comments that there'd be some difficulty for us. But we certainly think we'd be able to argue there's at least a loss of 1 lawful space as a minimum.
Thank you. I'd just like to bring in then our Transport and Aviation Manager, Mr. Tully, to try and bring together the issues here around how many, in your assessment, lawful parking spaces will be lost, and what effect you believe that this application, if it were granted, would have on the highway.
Thank you very much, Chairman. If we look at the photograph there, I have concerns for road safety. As you can imagine, there would be children moving amongst the vehicles, not seen by traffic circulating. At the moment, the petitioners have mentioned, and Councillor Mills has also mentioned in his correspondence, that situation can work satisfactorily because neighbours work together. I would be concerned that in the future that situation may no longer take place. I have looked at the dimensions of the turning head, and my calculation is 2 vehicles could lawfully park there. By allowing the pavement crossover to be approved, there would be a loss of 1 parking space. 1 vehicle park could still continue to park there with the vehicle crossover. Thank you, Chairman. Okay, so what we have here, what I see on the photograph, are 6 vehicles parked at the curb, and 1, what I would call double parked in the centre. Now,
I think we disregard the one that's double parked because that is obstructing the highway, and if any of the other cars want to move, the other three, they would need to ask the neighbour to move. So that's obstructing the highway. It's therefore unlawful, and I don't believe that we should be taking that into consideration as a parking space. So what we have there are 3 parking spaces against the curb. Why are they not appropriate as laid out in your view?
Thank you, Chairman. The cars that are parked head-on to the curb would need to reverse out onto the highway, which we are concerned about as that raises road safety concerns. We would wish vehicles to park parallel to the curb.
I understand that, but if this were a drop curb allowed in an ordinary street, ordinarily there's either reversing into it or more commonly reversing out of it. Why would that be different here? Why is reversing into the close or the green area considered to be a highway risk? Sorry, Chairman, I think I'm referring to the 2 vans, the white van and the red van. Both appear to be parked at right angles to the curb. For those vehicles to make their way, they would need to reverse out onto the highway, which raises road safety concerns. But will not, even if they were parked parallel, have to reverse out in that they couldn't turn around in that turning circle? Parking parallel is, of course, normal practice, and, of course, taught in driving tests. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, you can understand what we're trying to get. What I'm trying to get at here is the nub of the issue, which is how many lawful parking spaces are there and how many would be lost. It's also exiting your car. You've got 3 cars behind you. I understand where you're coming from, but I can't allow members of the public to address the committee. I'm sorry. I'm just trying to explain to you what my questionings were and why I was asking those questions. So what I'm trying to get in my mind is how many lawful parking spaces could reasonably be constructed around that turning circle, and if the drop curb were allowed, how many would then be lost? And that then forms a view about the impact on parking in that area. Okay, Councillor Chamdal, you indicated.
Thank you, Chair. Just going from the officer's comment, could you just clarify? So what we're saying is those 3 spaces with the 2 vans and the car, it's a problem because they reverse out. What if they reverse inwards, so they're facing outwards? How would that do? Because it's quite confusing for me. I can't really understand how many spaces we can actually lose from it, just looking from this picture.
That's a very good question, and certainly drivers could choose to reverse into those spaces where they're parking at right angles to the curb, but we'd have to question whether in fact that would be done in practice by every driver every time. I wouldn't be at all confident that that would take place. And if I can answer your earlier question, Chairman, the turning head currently provides legal parking for 2 vehicles. With the drop curb, that reduces to 1 vehicle, bearing in mind though that the 1 vehicle would be able to park off street.
Thank you very much. Very clear point made there. Councillor Duncan.
Thank you, Chair. I sympathise very much with residents, as I think we all do, because we know that this area is subject to unauthorised airport parking by operators who take people's money and they fly off on holiday thinking their cars are safely stored, and they're not. They're on the public highway. Also commuters, holiday makers, and this reduces the amount of parking for residents. I mean, I applaud the residents for having worked together here, but really, in my view, I have to go back to the basics of what is the road there for. It's there for access. I know people park on the road. What happens if emergency vehicle is required? What happens if there's an ambulance required here? What happens if there is a disabled person who lives here or moves in here at some point? And to have access to a property, I can see that the corner configuration makes that difficult, but also it opens up the possibility of other residents in adjoining properties also gaining access to off-street parking should they choose to have that. My main concern is that the parking is safe. At the moment, it is not safe, and there is the issue of access for emergency vehicles and possible disabled access, which we have to consider. That's what the highway is for. I think it urgently needs sorting out through a parking management scheme, and also for unauthorised illegal operatives who are using the public highway for business purposes. But I realise we can't decide that here. But we have to decide it on those basic principles, for me anyway. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other colleagues? Councillor Dillon.
I wouldn't have put it as eloquently as that, but I agree 100%. But I would have said pretty much the same. Those 3 vehicles for me, 4 vehicles, even that Nissan there, it's going to find it difficult. It's still reversing out, so you've got 4 cars that have to reverse out effectively, and you don't really lose any car parking spaces in the whole scheme if you have one parked onto the drive. So I have no problem with with overturning the application, to be honest with you.
Thank you very much. What I would like to do, if I may, just 1 second, Councillor Arco-Villana, is just clarify. We have before us the report with a refusal reason about the loss of existing on-street parking. But you're actually saying, Mr. Tilley, that there is no net change. So there is, although there is a loss of 1 on-street parking, there is a gain of 1 off-street. Therefore, there's no net change in parking available. Is that correct?
Currently, Chairman, parked legally, 2 vehicles could safely and legally park in that turning head. With the new dropped curb, that would reduce to 1 off-street and 1 on-street. Please also bear in mind that removing those illegally parked cars would restore the turning head for use by everybody, including fire service, refuse vehicles.
Thank you very much. Okay, that's clear. Councillor Ahmed Rallana.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can I ask a question? Would it be detrimental to the highway safety if we are to approve the application? Would it be detrimental to the highway safety if we are to approve it?
Thank you very much. Mr. Tilley.
Thank you, Chairman. No, the risk to road safety would be reduced. People, residents, would be safer.
Thank you. Mr. Alfred-Alani, you wish to come back, and then Councillor Chamdal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for allowing me to ask a supplementary question. If there is no public harm or any detriment to the highway safety, I'm not hesitant. I would like to overturn the officer's recommendation to approve the application. And also, if may I say, if it's refused, what are the robust grounds to defend ourselves at the inspector? If he could explain, please.
Let me just park that last little bit for a second. Councillor Chamdal.
Thank you, Chairman. Could I just have clarification from the officers? Page 10, 1 from the bottom paragraph. Could you give us some clarification on this now? We've had this report with us for a little while. We've gone through it. Now we're changing the position entirely. Could you have some clarification on that statement, which is, in addition, if permission were granted for this crossing, it would set an undesirable precedent, encouraging other nearby addresses to apply for a similar crossing provisions, therefore further reducing on-street parking availability and exacerbating the already high parking pressure that local residents endure.
Sorry, I'd like the Transport Manager to answer that one first. It's a Highways Officer's statement, so I believe that should be addressed first by him, and then we'll allow you to pick it up, Mr. Roger. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. This application has been discussed at length in the office, and myself, as Transport and Aviation Manager, have formed the view that the recommendation should be for approval, taking into account the unsafe situation that currently exists, that should neighbours, for want of a better way of putting it, fall out, this illegal situation would not operate, but of course it is illegal, and I would not be confident of winning a refusal at appeal, and it has been mentioned already, a preferable route for everybody would to apply to the council for a parking management scheme.
Okay, thank you. It seems reasonably clear now that we have that advice, and we have had 3 members indicating that to overturn the officer's recommendation here. So could I invite somebody to try and take this forward? Councillor Dillon.
Yeah, I'd recommend that we overturn the officer's recommendation on the grounds of road safety, but also add in an informative for the council to help residents with an on-street parking situation, so help with parking permit scheme, possibly look at something that we could do with the green space area there to help with additional parking. I think that would be it.
Thank you. Okay, so you're formally proposing that, aren't you? Councillor Ahmed-Ulana?
Chairman, thank you. I'm happy to second to overturn the officer's recommendations to approve the application.
Sorry, we're just head of...
Just one thing, I'm not going to say anything against the direction of travel members are saying. It's just that if members wish to impose any conditions, we'd need to consider that if you're approving. I've just had a quick sort of whisper with Meg. We can't think of any. One option would be for you to, if you are going to approve it, but to delegate to me as head of planning to double check there wouldn't be any conditions to add. At the moment, my thought process, it would just be a simple approval because effectively all the works have been done, but you delegate to me to double check, and then I can run that past the chairman and Labour lead, and if there are any conditions, I can't envisage there be anything onerous, then the chairman and Labour lead could ratify those conditions.
Thank you very much. Okay, so we've had this one formally proposed and seconded by Councillor Ahmed-Ulana, subject to the caveat or that we refer to the head of planning to double check that there are no conditions appropriate for this one. I think it's also quite a useful informative to be put in there, informing the applicant and other residents that actually the local councillors are there to assist on these matters and to encourage them to contact them and deal with it, because I think that is a way forward. So I don't think that is helpful. So having been formally proposed and seconded, can I have a show of hands, please? I'd take the vote, I think, on this one. I think there's enough energy in the room here. Can I please have a show of hands to overturn the officer's recommendation and approve this planning application? 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. Any abstentions? Thank you. 1 abstention. That application is overturned. Planning permission is approved. Thank you very much. Okay. We now turn... Ladies and gentlemen, if I could please ask you to leave the room quietly. That would assist us moving on with business. Agenda item 705, Sweetcroft Lane, Hillingdon. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. This application relates to 105 Sweetcroft Lane, which comprises a detached dwelling situated at the junction of Sweetcroft Lane and Hersey's Road. The proposal is for the change of use of the property to a 7-bed house in multiple occupation. The application is the subject of 3 letters and a petition, and the details of the consultation replies are set out on page 22 and 23 of the agenda. Main issue for members to consider: the principle of the use, the quality of the accommodation provided, and the impact on adjoining residents. The site is not within an area, in terms of the principle of the use, the site is not within an area to which council has applied an Article 4 direction which restricts permitted development rights to convert properties to multiple occupation. Therefore, it is a question of whether there is an over-concentration of HMOs within the vicinity of the site. And the Council's supplementary planning guide, Houses in Multiple Occupation, suggests that this would occur if over 15% of the plots on a 1 kilometre stretch of road are in HMO use. The Council's records indicate that there are no other HMOs on Sweetcroft Lane. Thus, the conversion of this property to an HMO would not breach the 15% threshold. In terms of the quality of the accommodation provided, the Council's supplementary planning guidance on houses in multiple occupation sets out recommended guidelines relating to the internal layout of such developments and the sizes of rooms to be provided. In this case, all of the rooms comply with or exceed the council's minimum requirements, and the property has adequate communal facilities which also comply or exceed the council's minimum standards. The SPG also recommends a minimum of 15 metres squared of private usable amenity space per habitable room, excluding those used for communal purposes. Thus, 105 square metres of amenity space should be provided. With a usable garden area in excess of 300 square metres, the development complies with this standard. Thus, it's considered that development provides an acceptable environment for its occupants. In terms of the impact on adjoining occupiers, no external alterations to the building are proposed, and there is no significant alterations to the internal layout. The parking complies with the required standards, and there are no party walls through which noise can be transmitted. Thus, it's considered that the proposal would not impact unduly on adjoining occupiers. Many of the problems with HMO stems from the lack of proper management supervision, and outwardly visible signs include unkept gardens and so on, which lead to an impact on the street scene which is unacceptable. Thus, it's considered essential that conditions relating to management and maintenance are applied, and this has been recommended in this case. In conclusion, the principle of the use is considered in compliance with policy. The proposal is considered to provide an acceptable living environment for its occupants, and the impact on adjoining occupiers is not such that a refusal could be justified. Accordingly, approval is recommended. If I can just go through the plans. That is the existing property. And again, there's very little change to the internal layout that's being proposed. And this is the property itself. And that's the front area. As you can see, there's plenty of parking available. And the nearest property to it is, as members can see, the property there, which is a reasonable distance. So your officers consider that in this particular case the use is acceptable. If I could just add that the property is in use for 6 people under permitted development rights currently, so they are seeking an increase in the number. And there is a short addendum on this which changes the reason behind condition 3, and that's set out within the addendum. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Colleagues, Councillor Dunham.
Yeah, I mean, I don't like HMOs, but I can't see any reason not to refuse this one. Plenty of parking, plenty of space. It's a lovely road, so...
Sorry, my apologies. There's a petition on this one. Okay, I have jumped the gun again. We have Mary Clancy, a petitioner, and I have to read something into record here, but we do also have the applicant, I believe, present in the room, so you're right, there is a... let me first read in to the record what the petitioner would say if they had been present, and that is, Alan, 103 Sweetcoff Lane, informs me that you can put our questions to the panel. My questions are, if there are only change to present use of 105 Sweetcroft Lane is to add another bedroom, why does there need to be a change of status to HMO? We'll explain that. At present, 105 Sweetcroft Lane is a home for people with learning disabilities, and as the paperwork states, a valuable asset to the community. My concern is that once the status is changed to HMO, this could change and the dwelling used for other reasons. What guarantees can be put in place to ensure this does not occur? What guarantees do we have that the number of occupants will not exceed 7? The report states that the number of occupants could be 14, but a limit of 10 is in place at present. Even an increase of 4 occupants is a substantial increase, and 14 occupants is over 100% increase. And that is being submitted by Mary Clancy. Okay. Sir, you have A.S. and Sons, the applicant, or Mr. Corbin Ali, the agent. You have the opportunity to speak if you wish to do so. If you would like to, come forward, please. Please. It's your entitlement. As I say, microphone, the button in front of you, it's toggle on and toggle off. You have 5 minutes, 4 minutes with the green light, 1 with the amber, and when it goes to red, I'll draw you to a close. Your convenience, sir.
Thank you very much. I don't think I'll take 5 minutes. The current use of the building is actually supported living for people with learning disability, and there are 6 residents living there, and they've been living there for a year and a half. But to increase from 6 to 7, there's a change of use, and that's the reason why the HMO application has been put in. The additional resident, we've had further demand from the Hillingdon Borough Social Services that there are other referrals waiting in hospital or residential care home looking for further accommodation. So that's the reason why we put an application for the additional bedroom, and there is no other reason. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. If I could invite you to turn the microphone off. Colleagues, are there any questions for the petitioner? Councillor Duncan.
Thank you, Chair. Could I just ask if there are any staff that are resident on site?
Not on site. They're not residents. They come on 3 shifts. There are 3. We operate morning, evening, and night shift, and that's it. Nobody stays there.
But a member of staff is at the resident 24/7.
That's right. Yeah.
Fine. Thank you very much. Councillor Chandal.
Thank you, Chairman. One of the concerns were about changing it to student lit in terms of movement. The question was, how many staff do you staff movements do you have daily? Sort of, is it a lot of staff coming in? Do you have a number?
There are 1 core staff per shift, morning, evening, and night, and then there's 1-to-1 staff, depending on the need of the resident. It could be 3 to 4 staff per day.
So it's about 3-4 movements a day?
Yes.
Okay. Any more questions of the applicant agent? Thank you very much. So I invite you to return to your seat. What we have here, colleagues, is an application for an additional bedroom. For me, I believe the matter is slightly complicated by Condition 3 in its wording, where it allows it to grow to 10, and that, of course, is an intensification of some magnitude, and I don't believe that the report has adequately gone into that in detail. And therefore, as 7 are being requested, I believe 7 single bedrooms should, if the committee were minded to go down that route, would be appropriate, and to adjust the wording of Condition 3. I also think, on hearing from the applicant stroke agent, that also hearing about the support staff that do attend, if this were to increase to allow double occupancy in some of those rooms, one might expect even more staff to attend, and of course that then has quite significant impacts. And I think, for me, that is also a planning reason why we might wish to limit it at 7 at this stage. So that's my thoughts. Open it for your consideration. Councillor Dillon.
I hadn't finished my sentence previously, but I was going to say something along the lines of the condition that you've just talked about, how we could actually, or could we bring that down to just a 7?
Mr. Rogers, could we do this?
There was a rationale for that line, which relates to a paragraph in the 2004 SPG, but as members will know, policy carries greater rating than guidance. So I wouldn't see an issue with what's been discussed, but it means the reason in the addendum should probably be altered to delete the reference to the guidance and just have policy OE1.
Okay. Councillor Ahmed Wilana.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The application is to allow 7, and if we are assured that there are no more than 7, I'm happy to approve it.
Thank you very much. Councillor Yarrow.
Thank you, Chairman. The comments that the resident asked of you are almost the same as what I'd written down here, and the key thing is the numbers. And I certainly, it's in my ward, and I'm afraid we look upon these things with slight suspicion from bad experience in the past. I know we're not supposed to talk about the past, but this is an easy thing to change to a student HMO. However, having listened to the applicant agent, and you see the kind of place that it is now, I believe it's still going to remain as it was or as it is. And I would certainly be happy to approve this on the basis that we alter the section 3 to 7 maximum.
Okay, would it be agreeable to the committee if we were to approve this application to allow the head of planning to adjust the wording of condition 3 to reflect the view that it should be limited to 7 single letting rooms, and the reason being the impact on residential amenity and also the amount of other visitors that may be attending parking, because the more of residents of this nature that need support, the more staff that will be required, and that then becomes an impact in a residential street. Councillor Duncan.
Thank you. But we are, if we go down this road, we are approving an HMO. And I just wonder, I mean, I know it doesn't fall into any other use class that we can put it into. But if we're approving an HMO, then it's unreasonable, because say it does become a different operation where there are no staff going in, then you would use double rooms as double rooms. So we would have to have a very good reason for limiting it.
Well, the reason I believe is the one that I outlined, that if it was to carry on in this manner and were to have double rooms up to 10 or more, and each required support staff to attend, that becomes problematic. So I believe that we need to limit the number of residents that are being supported, and that is what's being requested here, is that support. So I would limit it for 7, and if they wish to change the use then to become another ordinary HMO, then it would be quite proper for them, I believe, to be able to come back. But what we have before us is an application that if we were to agree with a limit of, say, 10 or 14, we could be opening up some quite significant impact on residential amenity because of the circumstances of this supported living.
I do understand that. I appreciate where you're coming from. I'm just looking for a form of words that can we say something like an HMO for supported living, and then that would relate the condition to the use, and we would have some grounds if there ever was appeal or discussion about it.
Right. I think it will be very difficult for us to come up with a form of words, because which might be supported by an inspector more than anything. If you are changing to an HMO, then to restrict it to a certain type of HMO is very difficult. The number of rooms that are let, or the number of people that occupy it, certainly you can condition, and the reasons for that would be the impact on adjoining occupiers, and I think that's what's being proposed. But it would be very difficult for us to say it can only be supported living, or it can only be one other type of any other type of HMO use, because the impact, the reasons for that would be difficult, because the impacts would be very similar.
The reason that I'm trying to proceed in a logical way, even though it may not come across in that way. If we're going to restrict the condition, we have to have a reason for that. The Chair has very eloquently explained those reasons. I agree, I support those. But, as I said originally in my original query, we are just approving it as an HMO. If we could say it's an HMO for supported living, this is the understanding of the committee, and that's why we are imposing the condition. So the condition then links to the use in a very direct way. That's what I'm trying to say. Otherwise, we're imposing this condition just on an HMO, and as it's pointed out, some of the rooms are large enough to be doubles, and there doesn't seem to be a logical reason why we're doing that, or to impose that.
Mr. Roger.
I do know a little bit about this particular applicant. So I know they've entered into a number of contracts with the Council of Social Services, who seem very happy giving them lots of contracts. And as far as I know, this particular applicant isn't one of the applicants that causes us any problems. We have no enforcement complaints relating to them, that kind of picture. So where I'm going with this is, my worry would be that if we try to be too clever, we might actually cause problems to the applicant, when I don't think we're dealing with an applicant we need to be unnecessarily concerned about.
Okay, what I'm not trying to do here is to tie the hands of the owner of the property or anybody else. It is to protect the amenity of residents nearby. What the use of being described here is of the supported living, and we've had described before us by the applicant or agent the amount of support that is required and sometimes attend this facility. Now, if the occupancy were to double, then one would expect the amount of support to also double. Then becomes a question about the suitability of that next to a residential house. And what I'm proposing is that we just limit that, cap that risk off by limiting this HMO to 7 single-let bedrooms. And if the change of use wishes to be, then they'll come back and explain that this is now for students and we don't need the support, therefore that reason no longer exists, and that's to be explained and can be considered by somebody else, would be my suggestion. Is that not an appropriate reason for a condition? Would that not stand up?
Yes, I mean, in essence, what you're saying is that you're concerned about the impact on adjoining occupiers, and that is a reason that we can feel that we can defend on appeal.
Thank you. I'm getting a number of nods of heads, so let's try and move this one forward then, please. Councillor Ahmed-Walana.
Thank you, Chairman. Subject to the condition of numbers limiting to 7, I'm happy to move with the officer's recommendations to approve.
Thank you very much. Councillor Chapman. Thank you. Can we show of hands, please, here? This is with delegated authority, the head of planning, to adjust the wording of condition 3 to reflect 7 single, and that was unanimous by everybody. Thank you. Okay, we go now to number 8. So, which application are you here for?
Number 9.
Can we whistle through to number 9 on the slideshow? Easy enough?
Yes.
Let's go to number 9 then for you, sir.
Thank you, Chairman. Very quickly, this application is for a variation of condition 2, which is relating to the approved plans. During the construction, a number of amendments were carried out and built out, and those are set out in detail under the proposed scheme. And so on page 58 and 59, the changes are set out. I would point out the comments of the Council's design officer. Whilst this has reduced the quality of the scheme, it hasn't to such an extent that it would warrant refusal on design grounds. So the scheme is considered acceptable still, and I would also point out that whilst we're recommending a number of conditions, the details of those conditions have been in essence mostly cleared, including contamination. We have approved landscape schemes and provisions for cycle parking and bins is made within the building itself rather than within the grounds of the site. So we are recommending approval. If I can just show you probably the photographs is the best thing. That is the layout as and these are the internal and this is as built elevations. As you can see, it is considered to be acceptable, and we are recommending approval. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Dillon.
Yeah, it's part retrospective, so it'd be difficult, I think. And if the officers are happy, then I'm relatively happy to move that we follow officers' recommendation.
Before we get down that way, I have an issue. Are there any other little niggles? Mine's only a little niggle. Councillor Chamdal.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm the local ward councillor in this area. It is great to have a building put up. It was previously just, when the pub got taken down, it was just a bit of open land. There was loads of issues they had over there. We have a building there now. My question is on page 62. second paragraph. Just a couple of things. One, on the third sentence, we've got original approval on balance. Just want to know what on balance we're talking about. And the first sentence, the building is now almost complete and appears to be generally in accordance with the amended planning application. It's just words, just if you could put that it wasn't built to plan, that was approved by the planning committee, but now it is in accordance generally to the amended plan. So if you could just have some comments on that.
Thank you.
From anybody.
I think that is quite helpful, that those words do suggest that it, even though it's now almost complete, that it may not be 100% in accordance with the amended planning application, because it just says it's generally in accordance. Therefore we want some certainty that there isn't going to be, that this isn't wrong.
I think it's an unfortunate choice of words. I mean, generally shouldn't really be there. It is in accordance with the plans that you have before you, and generally is because they haven't completed it, so they still have to comply with the landscaping conditions and so on. So it should have probably said that it's in accordance with the plans as far as the building goes, but there's still more work to be done with the rest of the site.
Thank you. Asked and answered. And an explanation of the on balance. What are the on balance issue here?
Again, that's relating to the Conservation Officer's comments, which is saying that it's reduced the quality and so on, but still on balance it's acceptable.
Thank you. Councillor Dillon.
If I can give Councillor Chandler, we discussed, I was on the committee that approved this application. It was discussed at length, and it just about got through. So the on balance, it was pretty much on balance.
Okay, the issue that I have is regarding the privacy of the ground floor residence block B. Although that they don't have any bedrooms or anything, they do open on to what appears to be general amenity space, and there are bathrooms on each of them, and none of them are conditioned to be obscure glazed on to have defensive planting, and I do believe that that is a privacy issue.
I mean, there is a obscure glazing condition, and we can add to that this condition 4 on page 51. We can add that those windows are part of the obscure glazing condition.
Thank you. It was only a minor issue, so a slight adjustment there. I also believe that one of the conditions, the lifetime homes and wheelchair units, needs to be amended, in that, having removed the opportunity for a lift, we can't get wheelchairs up to the upper floor, therefore they can't be M42.
The upper floors, yeah, so we need to amend that condition relating to the ground floor only.
Thank you very much. Any other issues at all, colleagues? No? Somebody to help me take this forward? Councillor Duncan. Subject to those changes, Councillor Alfred-Bolana.
Second.
Thank you very much. Show of hands, please, here. That is everybody. Thank you. Thank you very much, sir. Okay, go back to agenda item 8.
Thank you, Chairman. Site adjacent to 45 Corol Gardens, formerly a garage court. We did have a previous application which was refused on 3 grounds, which are set out on page 38, relating to parking, the impact on adjoining occupiers, and a residential environment for future occupiers in terms of the window positions. Those reasons have now been overcome. The parking complies, as you can see with that. The parking complies with the requirements of the highways and our standards. The development is now compliant with the 45 degrees, as shown again on that drawing, and there are no windows now which are on the side elevation which are habitable room windows, so all of the habitable room windows either face front or rear of the site. So in terms of the quality of the accommodation, that is now acceptable as well. So they have overcome all of the previous reasons for refusal, and for that reason we are recommending approval. Again, if I can just show you the plans. As you can see, all of the habitable room windows now front and back. And the parking. And it's difficult because the site is boarded, but that's it there. And Those are the adjoining properties. So with that, it's recommended for approval. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Rani. Councillor Dillon.
I actually marked the lift thing down on this one and missed it on the other one. But that was the only slight whinge I had about it. And if they've done their assessment and they can't afford to put it in, I suppose we have to be content with that. At least we get it on the ground floor. So I have no problem with it. Don't know if anyone...
Are you moving on officer's recommendation?
Oh, I've tried before, but I've jumped the gun. So
thank you. No. I'm very comfortable.
I will move officer's recommendation.
Thank you very much. Somebody seconded. Councillor Chapman. Thank you. A show of hands, please, on this one. Everybody, thank you. Okay, number 10. Oakland Road.
Thank you, Chairman. This is an application for a new dwelling adjoining 28 Oakland Road. The application has previous history on it. Again, there have been refusals, mainly relating to extensions, but in very similar size and scale. And again, those are set out on pages 74 and 75 with the refusal reasons set out. This extension is very similar to the last application in terms of 2016 3333, which has the reasons set out. And so for that reason we are recommending refusal. In terms of its size and scale, the application or the site is a corner site. It does infill the majority of the space to the side, and we have been successful on appeal where such extensions have occurred or have been proposed. And in this particular case, the width exceeds the 2/3 limitations that we have in the supplementary guidance, and we're saying that it's not set back from the main frontage, which results in a fairly large expanse of roof there. So in terms of its design, it's considered acceptable. So for those reasons, we are recommending refusal. Again, if I just show you the photographs, we get to the site. That's the site itself and the other side, and then to the rear, and then those are the properties to the rear of it that have fairly recently been constructed. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Dillon.
Trying to be a little bit greedy here, I concur 100% with the officer's recommendation and move that we go with the officer's recommendation.
Wouldn't wish to get in the way of that one. My own thought is whether or not the refusal reason 1 should be strengthened, as this one appears to me to be more about the design of the building, that if they adjust it, it sort of satisfies it and doesn't adequately reflect the impact on the open character of the corner plot, and which is something that we're seeking to protect here. So I do believe that we need to somehow adjust the wording to ensure that it isn't just a design change that's needed, it is something about closing of that corner plot, an open space that we're looking to protect.
I think that is correct, and we have a form of wording, as we have a number of applications which have been before members, so we can substantiate or add to that reason if you delegate to the head of planning. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. So, subject to delegation, amending that condition, that refusal reason, formally proposed by Councillor Dillon, seconded by Councillor Chamdow. Show of hands, please. Everybody, thank you. Number 11.
Thank you, Chairman. Another one with previous history. This is a very on balance decision or recommendation to you. There is a previous refusal relating to the gaps between the properties and the amenity space provision. The gaps between the properties are not, on one side particularly, compliant with the 1 metre requirement, and so we're recommending it for that reason, and the amenity space falls approximately 10 square metres short. As members can see from the site plan, the gardens on the adjoining properties are fairly short, so this one, in terms of its depth, reflects the character of the area, but in terms of its size, because this is a two-bed dwelling, the requirement is for 60 square metres, whereas the adjoining properties are all flats and the requirement is either 20 or 25 square metres. They comply, this one wouldn't, so that is the reason why we're recommending refusal. If I can again go through the plans. And it is, as I say, one side of it which doesn't comply, and that is a side just adjacent to 15 and 16 Churchfield Close. And these are the adjoining properties. That's the site, or the next door to the site, and the other side, and that with the tree on it is the actual site. If I can just add that there has been agreement for the tree to be removed previously, so this isn't an issue that's been raised in this particular case. Thank you, Chairman.
Colleagues, the wording here, definitely on balance, flags up in my mind straight away, and when you look at the context, I'm trying to identify the planning harm here and whether or not the desire to provide another housing unit outweighs the fact that it doesn't strictly comply with our policy by 39 centimetres down one side and by a few square metres of amenity space. Matter for the committee, as it says, very on balance. Councillor Dillon. While we're looking at that, Mr. Rodgers, just describe why the tree's not an issue.
Yeah, so the tree's sandwiched between the sort of either side of the terrace of housing, and we asked the tree officer to look at it, and effectively the tree officer's got concerns that it's going to cause structural issues to both properties, and that effectively there's a very strong case to fell that particular tree. That's the sort of shorthand answer.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Duncan?
Yeah, I think it is an unbalance, but quite honestly, looking at the adjoining flats and the amount of amenity space available for them, I don't think this, as one property, would be particularly out of character with that area. And so, where we are exhorted to make best use of land and to approach things in a positive and proactive way. I mean, for me, there doesn't seem to be excessive or material harm, and I would be quite happy to allow it.
Thank you very much. Other views, colleagues? No other views? Okay. Is that a formal proposal then, that we overturn the officers? Yes, hold on. Let me just bring in the head of planning here. That if we were to overturn, what might the considerations be and how might we protect against that?
The normal conditions that we'd apply for a dwelling house, parking, landscaping, materials, that sort of thing. But what we'd want to do here is withdraw all PD, because it's such a small plot and the garden, we wouldn't want them. And the other point that particularly backs that up in this case is because all the neighbours are flats, they don't have permitted development, so they can't do big extensions. So if this property were allowed and had full PD, they could do extensions that would have a serious impact on neighbours in the street scene. So I'd recommend all PD be removed in this case.
Agreed, I think.
Thank you very much. So you're formally moving that one, Councillor Duncan?
Yes.
Somebody seconded? Councillor Dillon, you formally seconded. Show of hands, please. This is overturn and approve. That's unanimously agreed. Thank you. Conditions delegated to the head of planning, of course, as was proposed there. We'll take 12 and 13 together. These are the same site. This is one is a listed building consent, one's the actual planning.
Thank you for that, Chairman, because there is only one presentation. They are the same application. One's a listed building, obviously, and the other one is a planning. This is a variation of condition which results in an increase in the height of the building. If I can point out, it doesn't result in the increase in the terms of the use of the structure itself. It is the fact that there are additional requirements in terms of building regulations and so on, which need to be incorporated. As the addendum points out, the original plans were incorrect and showed the height to be less than it was originally by 450 millimetres, and the requirements of modern day building works have added an additional 450 millimetres to that. So the increase is 0.9 of a metre above what has been approved previously. In terms of the street scene and so on, it has no impact. More importantly, in terms of the listed building works, it has no impact because the structure that is being reused is very much the same structure that was there previously. So for that reason, we are recommending approval, and there has been considerable discussion with the conservation officers and the applicants to ensure that this is the case. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Councillor Duncan.
That seems very straightforward, really, and doesn't affect the overall proposal at all, in my view. So I'm happy to move officer's recommendation.
Thank you. For this is on item 12. It's seconded. Councillor Arthur. Sorry. Show of hands, please, on that one. And on 13.
And also to move item 13 as per the officer recommendation.
Councillor Yarrow this time. Seconded. Show of hands, please. That's everybody. Thank you very much.
I could, just for members' information more than anything, this was one of the very first applications that I think I presented at committee when I arrived here, and it's been ongoing ever since. But you'll be glad to know that works are underway on site, and hopefully the structure will reappear. Original barn, yep.
What I do like is the drawing